There are so many moments along the way where we thought we weren't gonna make it, but here we are. Hey Venture, congratulations on 20 years, 20th birthday. I am holding in my hand some really significant documents. First off, I didn't think I had any of these anymore. I was actually looking for something for a class that I was teaching and stumbled upon historic documents for Venture. This right here is our official We became an AG church, October of 2005. This is the thing that people always ask me about. I didn't think I owned it anymore. I thought it was lost in the dozen moves that we've had over the years. But in the history of Venture, everybody hears the story that it began as an idea for my master's thesis, that I had written a paper on how I would plant a church, and it was fully theoretical. I never planned on doing it, but we tell the story often. But the end result of it was the Holy Spirit spoke to Di and I and challenged us to give our 30s to church planning. And everybody always asks me after I tell that story, hey, can I see the thesis? And I never knew where it was. I found it. Right here is my master's thesis with comments from my professors.
Wow.
Great integration throughout.
Wow.
Even your theology section. So this is the part that I think is the most fascinating. So after that initial meeting, we handed out forms to see if anybody was interested in being a part of the church. So this might be 6 months before we ever launched.
Totally forgot we did this.
These are the church forms, and I'm holding in my hand the interest form from my brother and sister-in-law, Mike and Tina Hale.
I'm glad they were behind us. It was a good start.
Here is Rebecca Chilson's.
Good job, Rebecca.
I'm not sure where Tyson was at this point. he was on the fence. And none other than Sky Holzinger.
Before we had any kind of a location, we were meeting in houses at this time. But I think it would be really fun if we actually took people down memory lane with us. Why don't we go and visit some of our original meeting locations and see where it all started?
Every single one of them?
Yeah.
All right. Come on, Venture.
Modesto. We had 3 small children. We were planning to plant up here in Mill Creek, Washington, which we were familiar with the area, but it had changed a lot since we had lived here.
Yeah, it basically doubled in size. When we were here last time, 132nd ended at Buffalo Corner.
Right.
Didn't go all the way to Highway 9.
Right. So we're on our way to our first meeting space. How'd we pick this spot? How'd it come about?
Well, it was over like maybe a 4 or 5 month period of time. I kept flying out and I would meet with small groups of people, and eventually houses weren't big enough for us.
Right.
So we needed some sort of gathering spot. And this is before the town center existed.
Yeah, exactly.
There was really nothing there other than McDonald's and the Albertsons.
Yep. Round table pizza.
Yeah, and a couple office spaces. So we actually were able to sublet a really large office space.
Yeah, it was a good size for people who own nothing. We didn't even own any furniture. We didn't even own desks.
At this point, we didn't even know where we were going to meet on Sunday. We were just looking for a gathering spot whenever we would come in town, and the staff that was already living here where they could kind of come and congregate and work. This is it, Mill Creek Office Park.
I know, 20 years ago.
We had offices here.
Hey, they have office space for lease.
We were here for almost 3 years. We had offices here. So here it is. This is the Mill Creek Office Park. I think we were here for about 3 years. We started at the suite in the bottom. Eventually, we moved over here and had this entire suite, the bottom floor. I remember the very first time we had a gathering here on Sunday morning. I remember we thought we should probably have greeters because this is the lobby area. And I remember I stood right here. I would open this and let people in. This began the tradition of me being in the lobby on Sunday mornings.
Wow. Suite 150, which is actually decently large back inside there.
We started having services. Not really services, we had gatherings on Sunday morning, and we did it for about 6 weeks.
Not very long.
And the only reason that we did it was because our midweek gatherings were getting too large. And then I started looking at all these people that were coming, and they would come midweek, but then they would go to the church that they were currently attending on Sunday mornings. And I remember thinking, I just need to get these people used to coming together and meeting together on Sunday mornings. So we switched our midweek gathering to Sunday morning, and then
with no chairs.
People started coming. The next thing you know, we have over 100 people, and we did that for a couple weeks. And then the leadership team, we all kind of met together and we looked at each other and we just thought we should start having Sunday morning services.
Go for it.
And we set a date, February 8th. We would have our very first service on a Sunday morning. Rented Sundays, Heatherwood Middle School.
Also, we couldn't really afford to rent multiple classrooms. So my favorite memory of this location is that the hallways were the classrooms. We just blocked off hallways with all of our rolling bins. Like the nursery was a hallway with just some rolling bins around it. We made do.
One of the highlights of this, I remember it was the end of year 1. Like we'd made it 1 year, and Glenn Berteau came and he spoke here for our 1-year anniversary. Yep. And I remember he did something that was so bizarre. He concluded his message by saying, I want you to go up to Brandon and Di. For everybody who was there, at that point, we're probably running close to 300 now. I mean, it's gone really well. And he says, go tell Brandon and Di you're in, that this is your church, that you're a part of it. And I remember when he said that, I was thinking, I don't need people to do that. That's not a big deal. So I remember as Di and I were standing at the doors, just thanking everybody as they were leaving, one family after another would come up to us and say, we're in, we're in, we're in. And I remember probably by about the 10th family that said they were in, it like hit me, and I found myself like standing there crying in the lobby as people are leaving, because this dream that Di and I had, we're now seeing it like come to pass, and we're seeing people actually be committed to this crazy idea of having a church in a middle school. And that's how Venture started, at this middle school, and we were here for about 1.5 years. But eventually, we had to finish junior high school, and we had to move on. So the first couple years of the church, we were in that stage where the church was 300 to 500, but it was fun, and it was the first time that we had people get upset with us, leave the church. That had been something I had never experienced, and I realized that working with adults was more difficult than working with teenagers. So we finished junior high, and we moved on to high school. Here was our third location, Jackson High School. Again, we met in the cafetorium. You entered right through there.
This was a big step up for us because of the optical seating, like the accordion seating, that just felt like we'd stepped up a little. Bigger space, better parking lot. Yeah, we felt like we graduated. We grew here. Lots
of amazing things happened in the period of time that we were at Jackson. One of the most amusing is the infamous prune juice communion service.
We were having communion that day, and one of the ushers who was helping pass out communion was just chuckling and almost in tears, and I didn't know why. And come to find out, he had picked up prune juice rather than grape juice for communion, and it was too late to replace it. So when we did communion and people were drinking what they thought was grape juice, and the expression on everybody's faces, it was so funny. I couldn't hold it. I was laughing so hard, and everybody walked out wondering, what the heck was that?
The only thing that my dad left out was that no one realized it was prune juice, especially me, until I was on the platform drinking the prune juice. And that was really awkward, trying to serve communion as I'm trying not to gag. Lots of amazing things happened here.
Our kids were really little here, and they remember and often remind us of how they would disappear from our site, and we could not find them. We would pack up after service, pack up the trailer, we'd be ready to go. We could not find our children or the Lindbeck children, and all 5 of them would be hiding somewhere.
Pretty much after the first service, we dedicated the next 2 services to exploring all there is in Jackson High School. I just remember wandering around, and it would be after teardown. I would hear our parents from all the way across the school screaming our names at the top of our lungs, and we rarely came back immediately because we knew the consequences that we would have to face.
Actually, maybe not Rachel. Rachel was pretty much perfect, but the 4 boys would often hide, and they got the parent wrath when we could not find them.
Being pastors' kids of a church planting family, we kind of were along for the ride the entire time from the very beginning. And some of the first memories I have from planting the church are when we were mobile, specifically at Jackson. And I just remember that we would have to get there at the very wee hours of the morning and help set up, and we'd be there all throughout the day until teardown was over. Like, that was how we spent our Sundays. I don't even think we were very helpful. I think we were just there because we had to be.
One of the interesting stories at Jackson was what led to Christian Lindbeck being a part of our staff.
We were home for Christmas. Jen and I were living in Boston, and so we were home for Christmas. I had gone out there to do another master's degree and start my doctoral work, and I had just found out from Boston University, not that it wasn't gonna work, just that they wanted me to do a 3rd master's degree before completing a PhD with them. And we had 2 little kids, and that just wasn't gonna happen. So I'm explaining this to him, and he's like, hey, we need some help around here. Is that something you want to start talking about? And that is literally in the bathroom at Jackson is where a dream started to unfold. Here we are.
And that launched us into the Year of Suck.
Let's talk about the Year of Suck, because it was also a blast. It just was a really complicated blast. Brandon calls me a little later and he's like, I got this idea. Instead of having an office space, let's have our staff be working out in the community. We're young dreamers, you know. Let's have them be all over the community, but we'll have a hub. We're gonna have this hub place where they all come back and work. And so we got what essentially was like a large garage space. Built this office for Brandon back there that was truly awful. And he couldn't be in it because of the fumes. Nobody really worked in those spaces. We all sat at the very front. You'd come in the door, and there was a couple glass tables out there. I have so many memories sitting at those glass tables, me and Di sitting out there, working on stuff for Venture, for Canyon Creek, and just cracking up. Those were both sucky and really fun days.
As thankful as we were for Jackson High School and as great as our memories were here, 3 years of being portable, every church planner dreams of having their own building.
Just want a building.
So we prayed, and through a miracle, we landed our first official our home. Come on, we'll take you there. I'll never forget, like, the economy has taken off in the Seattle area. Buildings are selling like crazy. I remember we would go and we would look at a building and it would be for sale for like $800,000. We'd get our key leaders together, we'd pray about it for a couple days, and we would go back to look at it again, only to find out that the building had sold for twice what it was selling for. And it seemed impossible that we would ever own a building. And we were a young church, and the vast majority of our church was under the age of 30, and they were really faithful, really committed, but were not at what you would say the peak earning years of their life. A plumber who was a part of our church was working on the house of the church treasurer of this building that we're heading to. And the church treasurer said, our church is closing. We have a building that's for sale. And so Christian Lindbeck and I met in front of the hub. We knew that we were going to look at this building, and we just sat in my car and we prayed and asked God to give us supernatural favor as we went to this building and began to negotiate to purchase this building. You know how when you get a first house, and that first house, you just love it. It's such a big deal. It's yours, you own it. But this is the way this young, growing, energetic church was. We bought this little tiny church building on Ash Way. And I always told everybody, they would say, where's your church? And I would say, you know when you drive the back road to the mall through Ash Way? Yep. And every time you do it, you drive by this really cute little church building? That was our little cute church building.
Church on the way to the mall is what we called it.
Yep, our first marketing campaign.
Yeah.
We're the church on the way to the mall.
Yep.
And now we're here. I remember the very first time Pastor Christian and I came to this facility. We left the hub, we drove over here, we walked around the entire building, and I'm not saying we believe in name it, claim it theology, but this is the first time we ever tried the name it and claim it stuff. I remember Christian and I coming to this patio right here and just laying our hands on this patio and begging Jesus to give us this building.
You know, you just have those moments in life where you can see that God is opening like the steps of your future. Even though it feels impossibly large, like we had no idea how we'd ever make this work. We got to that building with the overgrown grass and the sign falling over. We saw that building and we could both see our future. I remember us kneeling on the front doorsteps of that building and pleading with God, please God, somehow make it possible for this place to be our home. Sometimes you have a dream and you just don't know how you're going to get there. But if you can see it, and we could see it, then trust God with the next steps.
So one of the craziest stories that happened at this building happened one particular day while Morgan Butcher was sitting at his desk in the basement of this building. His desk was underneath the electrical panel, and he heard what he thought was a boiling noise.
And all of a sudden I hear this like, but it was like really faint. And I was like, what is going? It sounded like somebody's CPAP machine was going. And I just kept on hearing it. It was steady. It was, and I'm like looking around. I'm like, dude, do you guys hear that? Like, what is going on? And I open up the panel because it's like I'm like hearing it from like right in front of me. I like walked around and looked around the building, didn't hear it, went back to my seat and sat there, and then like heard it from the electrical panel. And I opened the panel and it got louder. And I was like, you guys, I think something's wrong.
And turns out it was a very concerning problem involving water and electricity. That was a Wednesday, so we were supposed to have a youth service that night and a kids service that night.
And so we go to check out the power, and it's the 3-phase power. So if you don't know what that means, I'm not talking about the like 110 coming in. I'm talking about like the primary power to the building is out. And we're trying to figure out what's going on, and we need power back. Like it's the weekend, so we're getting ready to have church. Di's dad, who runs heavy machinery, owns a company with heavy machinery, he comes to the rescue, and he and I go out there, and he's like, hey, let's just find the power line. So he starts, and it is pouring rain, digging out the side of the building, and we get down there and find the main power coming into the building. And what we see is that the line that comes into the building has been bumping against the side of the building, against a plumbing line that is in there.
And they found the electrical wire to the building looked like this and was inside of the water pipe to the building, somehow got severed in the process of something being installed, and electricity was running through the pipe with water. Thank you, Lord. And so Christian climbed down inside the ditch, and he and my dad made some repairs. Obviously, we called it a contractor. We keep this as a memory of the miracle that God did to protect us.
Again, we owned all the property out there. One of the things we were known for was our completely out of nowhere wacky videos.
Hi! Are you looking for a totally radical growth group this semester?
Hey kids! It's me, Gaylord Guest Card. If you look at your guest card, the first line says date of visit. That's today's date because you're visiting today. And if you don't know today's date, you're an idiot.
Help me.
Oh no, what's that? Are you okay, sir?
We have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Tub Toss Kit.
Don't you see that this teaches our children that to understand who they are on the inside, they have to express themselves differently on the outside, and how can they possibly work together unless our children existentially understand their own etymology? This confuses the whole thing. I think that's obvious to everyone.
I think it says Merry Christmas. I like the turtles.
I think you're an idiot.
All right, guys, this Sunday, we officially launch our Mill Creek campus. Is there anything with this that I've forgotten?
Con los terroristas.
And do the Harlem Shake.
Our children's pastor at the time was Leslie Davis. And when Leslie first saw the promo for her Easter egg hunt that she was spending all this time planning, she burst into tears crying and said, "No one can ever see this, ever." So we never showed it on Sunday, but it's gotten thousands of views on YouTube. So we would always walk from the Ashway building over to this coffee stand. And there was this sweet little college-age girl named Jordan who worked this stand. We think she owned the stand. But one particular time I came up here with Pastor Morgan.
I don't like this story. The same gal that, is always there is, taking our order, and she kind of looks at us, and I just remember her looking with kind of a curious face, like she's trying to figure out what the relationship is here.
And we're joking around with Jordan, and we ordered our coffees, and I said, "Hey Jordan, just out of curiosity, who do you think is older?" And she looked at Morgan and she goes, "I just always assumed he was your dad." It's one of the greatest things that's ever happened. So as the church continued to grow, again, 5 services in that little building, we knew we needed a miracle. We needed a larger building. So we started a campaign to raise money called The Amazing Race. The exact same situation we had in Heatherwood, the exact same situation we had in Jackson. because of what God is doing, church has nearly doubled in size, and lives have continued to be changed.
That's why. And that's why.
That's why.
That's why. That's why. We believe and we believe.
We believe. We believe.
In the amazing race.
In the amazing race. The amazing race.
And that's why we believe in the amazing race.
And our goal was to raise $1 million. As we're raising this $1 million, a really interesting opportunity fell in our lap. And there was a distressed church building over by Boeing and Everett that Christian and I saw advertised online.
Find out about this building, we start meeting with this church. It turns out this church is really struggling. It's a big building. They're struggling to hold the building. They want something smaller. We want something larger. And then we find out that our movement, the Assemblies of God Financial Services, holds the note on both of these buildings. And so we start cooking up an idea.
I asked Christian to send the lender a letter. And we decided to not use agents. We went strictly to our lender to deal with this. And because it's a Christian organization, I asked Pastor Christian to write a letter that laid out what we wanted, basically to swap buildings, keep our payment the same. And I said, when you do this, make sure to include a bunch of brothers and sisters in the letter, because that's church talk, audience. Especially in the Midwest. Yeah. And so Christian, embarrassed to admit this, we faxed the letter off, because that's what you did back then, expecting that we would hear back in a couple days.
And they called us to say this is one of the most offensive notes they've ever received.
A month later, they called us and said, with some minor modifications to your original offer, we're gonna do it. And then we made this incredible move where we swapped the Ashway building for this building right here.
Right there up in the corner is where, because all of our creativity came out in this space, that's where we put Morgan Butcher in a Superman suit for Father's Day.
Obviously, with my luscious hair and all, they thought, oh, Morgan will make a great Superman. So I get dressed up in, the ugliest Superman costume ever. It's like a onesie. And I go up on the building. And it's windy that day. I just vividly remember it was windy that day. And on top of the roof, there's a flat top roof, but there's walls. There's 3 or 4 foot walls. And so it's not like I was just standing on the roof of the building because you would only see the top half of my body. I had to figure out how to prop myself up on an 8-inch edge of the wall that was the roof of this building. And then it's a 40-foot drop. This was incredibly unsafe. I mean, I had no harness. I had nothing. I could have died again that day.
So we're walking to the back parking lot. This was the main parking lot. And you can see where that building is way up there. That used to be a driving range. And so one of the biggest issues that we had on Sunday mornings is that people would get a little bit intoxicated when they're at the driving range, and they would hit golf balls over the net, and golf balls would come flying onto our property and hit cars and break windows in cars. Yeah, that little square box metal building there, that's where we did youth.
It was one thing to have our own youth building, and the youth building was so fun, man. We had so much fun in that building. I remember one series we had I think we called it the armor of God or something. I don't know, it was about the armor of God. And we had all these swords that we just wanted to be on one of the walls. I don't know why, it just sounded like a good idea. So we literally hung like swords and battle axes all over the wall. We just like drilled these things into the wall. We had shields up on the wall. And it was just like that stuff all the time. Like anything we wanted to do, we just did in that building. Brandon, I don't even know if Brandon ever walked inside of that building. It was like, he didn't even know what was going on in there. We just like had so much fun with it. We did all-nighters up there. We had just so many fun memories in that building. It had a big roll-up garage door on it. So before and after service, kids would just like flood in and out of the building. It was just truly one of the most fun and creative seasons that we've ever had in youth ministry. But more than that, the ministry that happened while we were at that location was incredible. And the blending of students was so unique. I mean, we had in that season kids from Mill Creek, kids from Kamiak, we were getting kids from Everett. We were 3 blocks off of Casino Road, so we had like all these multi-ethnicity kids coming in. It was like a melting pot of different cultures and different backgrounds and different upbringings of students. And the ministry that happened was just like so rich and fulfilling. Specifically, like I remember in that season, like there was so many kids who, because of the uniqueness of that community, were without a mom or without a dad, being raised by a single parent. And I mean, Nicole and I still think about how special that season was, not having kids of our own, to really just step into like a paternal role in some of these kids' lives. And I don't know if they ever felt like that, but we prayed for them like they were our kids.
So we decided one year, well, let's rise to the occasion. And for Christmas, we had done a toy drive, and we were gonna go set up at Walter E. Hall Golf Course or the park right next to it and pass out toys to kids because it was Christmas break. Well, it was torrentially raining that day.
And so we packed up this like big container truck and we went down to the park and we were gonna set up the truck, and we had reindeer and elves to help and Christmas music, and we were gonna go out to the apartment building. Things in retrospect. We were gonna go to the apartment buildings along Casino Road and invite the kids to come to the truck with their parents and like, sounds so bad, like shop, you know? But now in retrospect, it sounds like strangers are gonna show up at your door, invite you to leave your house, and show up to a windowless container truck in the park. You know, these costumes that we have, these Santa Claus and reindeer costumes, they're not super high quality. So when they get wet, they're just the saddest, like draping. My sleeves are 10 inches past the end of my hands. The red dye is coming out. So I've got like red dye on my face, pouring down my hands. Terrifying. Just bedraggled. I'm also probably the grouchiest Santa on the face of the earth. A cultural statement at Venture is everything's an experiment. And that was an experiment gone a little wrong. So we moved it inside after that, and families showed up at scheduled times with their parents at a reputable place to select their gifts.
So you're seeing this amazing building and you're probably thinking, why in the world did Venture sell this building? Well, it's because everything in this building started breaking down. The HVAC system broke down, the roof needed to be replaced. We actually had plans to extend the building so that it would seat 800 in the auditorium. But before we could even get permits, we had to do $1.5 million of upgrades. And then we discovered after we sold the building that it wasn't seismically sound. One of the highlights of this Everett building is we were notified by a group of Christian bikers that Westboro Baptist was going to picket us. I'm not sure exactly why they chose to picket us. They picketed us in Christian Faith Center. And basically they lined up right in front of the Everett building and for a weekend gathering had all kinds of intensely inappropriate signs.
It's like we'd arrived or something.
I felt so cool. You know how much fun it is to tell people I was a part of a church that got picketed by the Westboro Baptist Church? It's like a badge of honor.
Probably the final memory attached to that building is actually we had sold it and moved out, or mostly moved out. It was almost completely empty. And our youth students, under the leadership of Morgan and Nicole, were supposed to go over the mountains to a winter camp. And a furious snowstorm hit, and it was going to be treacherous driving. And Morgan was just not feeling safe about taking people's children in school buses, wherever this retreat was. And so he and you put your heads together and you guys came up with a plan. Let's move it to the Everett building, which is empty.
And so we were like, we're gonna turn this place into our winter camp. And we're gonna make the whole weekend about like a goodbye to this season of ministry at this campus. So we literally went through, we had one leader painting murals on the wall of like, welcome to winter camp. We set up tents all throughout the building. We communicated to parents to shift. We had like different like field trips that we did all throughout the weekend. We took the kids to an improv show in Seattle. We rented out a bowling alley. We had catering from Olive Garden and all these restaurants being brought in for meals and stuff. We had laser tags set up in the back parking lot. We used the school buses as barrier. It was like everything we pulled off in literally like 36 hours to make this camp possible. And the best thing was we didn't tell any of the students about it. So we had communicated everything with parents. The kids showed up to the building, were ready to go, packed everything in the buses, and we took off, and me and Pastor Tony literally just like made up the scenario in which we had to come back to the church to pick up supplies that we had forgot. We show back up at the church, all of our leaders are there. Kids are coming off the bus, we're cheering as they walk back into the building. It ended up being one of the most memorable winter camps I think I've ever been a part of. God moved in that building, and I think one of the coolest parts of it was so many of the kids that had got introduced to the church and saved in that church, it was like their opportunity to like say goodbye to a chapter of their life as we walked out of that building for the last time and shut off the lights. It was truly like a remarkable endeavor for our team to pull off in that amount of time, and just couldn't have gone any better. One of the most memorable things from our time in youth ministry.
The Everett building was packed to the gills, which was a great problem. It also was not near Mill Creek and not where our founding members and the core people of our church lived. So we decided to plant a campus back here in Mill Creek. We had a team that set up and tore down that campus every week. They were portable for a while. And there came a time where I was voluntold by Brandon and Christian that I was gonna go and take over the leadership of that campus, which I did. And long story short, we grew, it was great. And we ended up buying this piece of property here in Mill Creek, right here on 35th, where we currently exist. That dome was, how do I say this nicely? A piece of junk. So
Some
grateful.
of my worst memories at Venture are attached to that.
So
dome.
grateful for that piece of junk. If you ever saw or entered that building, you know we made the best we could of really poor circumstances, but the land was incredible. And so getting this piece of property right here in Mill Creek really was a dream come true. It was the fight of a lifetime, and it is why we're still standing here today. Eventually,
we demoed the building and moved back
to Jackson, which we honestly felt like this about.
We ended up back at Jackson High School. 15
wasn't as
years
exciting as the
of
first
being
time.
a pastor, church planner, and I'm back where I started.
And we're having to amp up all the people about how exciting it is.
I felt like we took 10 steps backwards.
Back to a trailer, back to set up and tear down.
Everything that could go wrong went wrong. We didn't have our financing secured. We tore down our building, there was no going back. We needed a loan. We needed to break ground on our current facility, and all these things that could go wrong possibly went wrong.
It was a rough time. It was a rough season.
The second time at Jackson, it did start out rough, but everything began to change once we celebrated our 15th birthday. We had this miracle owner meeting.
What happened at that owner meeting, I don't think any of us will ever forget. Brandon kind of sat up there on the stool and he said, hey guys, I'm kind of out of options. I don't know why we didn't expect it, but literally it was like you watched the dominoes fall. From the first person who stood up, looked at her husband and looked back at us and looked at her husband and looked back to Brandon and looked at her husband, kind of like talking, like, like, and she's like, we're going to give this amount of money. We're willing to do this. I remember her saying, we moved up here so that our families could plant this church, and we're not giving up on it. And I think that those words unlocked faith in our church in that moment like I have never seen before.
Where the people in our church, within 30 minutes, committed to giving an additional $2 million. 2 days later, our loan got approved and we broke ground. Everything changed at Jackson. That last year was full of anticipation and excitement of what Jesus was going to do. We got to watch the building be built, and one of the highlights for all of us was being able to tour all of you through the building as it was getting constructed. And that entire journey led us to here. And the coolest part about this whole journey, which again, I'm thankful for everyone that's watching this, your part in all of this, because it took not just a village, it took a city to make this happen. And we're so thankful along the way. But we really believe that this puts a period on our first 20 years.
We would be silly not to recognize that for the past 20 years, God has just been positioning us for something that's going to be even greater than the stories we've told for the last 20 years. What am I excited about in this next season? I'm excited about being a part of something that is bigger than myself and is bigger than any one person here. To see campuses launching across Washington and who knows where else, to be a part of a church that believes in the power of generosity, to be a church that believes in the power of community, and to be a part of a church that is all in on mission is something that you can't help but to be excited for. And I'm really excited for the next 20 years to see how 20 years from now, we look back on what will be 40 years and to recognize that the miracles of 20 years of existence were only setting us up for what God really wanted to do in the next 20. And so I can't wait to see what God does. I can't wait to see the new faces that we don't even have in this church yet, that are going to find Jesus and experience his power and his life-changing.
Jen and I find ourselves kind of remarking at the sweetness of this season of life, but a big part of it for me is I love this community, I love the team of people that I'm working with, and I love to see what God is doing. And it's fun to see something that started so small and so rough at times grow into something that's so thriving and maturing. Like, we are set up now for a long future that's grander, much grander even than I think where we're at now. Like, I think God has got really great things in store. But for me, it's not so much that it's bigger per se. It's that it's growing into the very thing we always hoped it would be. It's still fun, still vital. Jesus is still in the middle. We're still trying stuff out. It's just that we finally have the people and the resources and the places to see the dreams that God gave us coming to fruition. These are really exciting days. And I'd say buckle up, and I mean this. we've just started. Like, what is to come in the next 20, I think, builds off the solid foundation that came out of these years of faithfulness. We have grown up, but we're not done growing up. Like, we've got a ways to go, and it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Venture, your name means a risky or daring journey, and it has been that. We've worked hard, we've sacrificed, we've taken big risks, and as a result, these 20 years have been full of people finding freedom, finding healing, finding peace and purpose. These 20 years have been full of people finding Jesus. But we've only just begun. We'll continue to take risks, and we're gonna swing big for the sake of the gospel. We are going to see God fill this place with His glory, because together we are Venture.
The next 20 years at Venture, I am just excited to see the spiritual growth that happens in the people at our church, and just all the fun that we get to have watching God do what He does.
Over the next 20 years, I think what I'm most excited about is to see the impact we make, not just on the region of Seattle, but on the city of Seattle. I think seeing how far our church has come just in these first 20 years gets me really excited for the future local churches we're going to plant all across the Northwest. And just seeing Jesus truly being made famous in our region and us helping change the narrative of what God is doing in our city.
I think what I'm looking forward to is having been a part from the very beginning to now. I feel like I was raised in this church. It feels like home and family to me. And I'm really looking forward to now raising my children in this church and having them experience a lot of the fruit from the years that we poured into and the work that we poured into this church, you know, from the very beginning, and getting them to experience the fruit of this and experience that family feel too.
Di and I are really thankful for everything that Jesus has done over these last 20 years. But let me tell you what I'm really excited about. I can't wait for what God is gonna do over the next 20. Here is the promise that God has in His Word for all of us. Ephesians 3:20 reminds us that God is able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. Venture, let me tell you what I'm really excited about. I'm excited about what Jesus is gonna do over the next 20 years. And Venture, our story is just getting started.